Live from the Carl Chevrolet Studios in West Des Moines, this is Iowa Live.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. It's so great to see Michael Swanger, the owner and publisher of the Iowa History Journal, joining us here this morning. Hey, Michael.
Hey, good morning, Lou. Great to see you again. Happy Veterans Day.
Happy Veterans Day to you, too. Iowa History Journal, November-December issue has some veterans mentioned in there. We'll talk about them, but let's talk about what else is inside of the latest installment of the Iowa History Journal.
You bet, Lou. Well, for starters, our cover story is about Phoebe Sudlow. And Phoebe Sudlow broke national gender barriers in the field of education in the late 19th century. And she did so by becoming the first superintendent of a school system in the United States. She served in that capacity from 1874 to 1878 for the Davenport Community School District. And then she went on to become the first president of the Iowa Teachers Association, the first female president, and she became the first lady professor, as they called them at that time, of English language and literature at the University of Iowa. So she became the first female faculty member. And to give you some context about how groundbreaking Phoebe was, this was 50 years before women were able to vote. So, you know, you and I have talked about Carrie Chapman Catt and many of the suffrage leaders in Iowa, right. And this is a full half century before that. So that's our cover story.
That's awesome. Also, we're talking about Iowa being 175 too, right?
Exactly. We're going to wish our state 175th anniversary birthday on December 28th. And the folks from the State Historical Society of Iowa were happy enough to, were fortunate, they were good enough to write a story for us about that and put their arms around a big subject. They have an exhibit down at the State Historical Museum about the state's history. That exhibit covers 13,000 years of history. Ours just covers 175 years of official statehood. So that's another story in the article, and it ranges everything from the Native Nations up into 2020.
All right. And on this Veterans Day, how about we talk about a Major General?
Yes. This is the second part of our two-part series about Major General John B. Anderson, who was a Parkersburg farm boy, went on to West Point, and went on to command the largest combat corps in World War II. And the author is his grandson, Michael M. Van Ness. And Michael's story picks up in the spring of 1945 when Anderson and his fellow Allied troops are advancing to Berlin, and they cross the Rhine River. I'll kind of leave it at that. And obviously, this is towards the end of the war, and then he covers his life after the war in this second part of his series. It's a wonderful story.
All right, let's talk a little football, too, because there's some football news in here.
There is, and if you're an Iowa State football fan, you definitely need to know the name Ed Bach. Ed Bach was the first All-American player from Iowa State. He was an All-American lineman in the late 30s, and he led that 1938 team, which still holds the record for the longest winning streak in Iowa State football history of 10 games. And he was a member. He became a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. Again, a first for Iowa State. And then he went on to become the CEO and president of Monsanto Chemical Company. Yeah. So he's an amazing figure in Iowa State football history. And the story really focuses on his time on the gridiron for ISU.
Yeah, really interesting story about his first couple of games as a Cyclone, getting his teeth knocked out, making his own teeth, getting trampled again during a Kansas State game and spitting out his fake teeth, and the umpire thought it was just like somebody was being too rough, so they used it to his advantage. Interesting story. Also, great article by you, young man, about Frank Thomas and his association with the Field of Dreams.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, I would be remiss if we didn't touch upon that. I know that it's a little bit old news in the sense that it was on September 30th when it was announced, much to the surprise of a lot of Iowans, that Frank Thomas and a venture group that he leads has taken over ownership of the Field of Dreams. And, you know, obviously that place has such a special place in the hearts of Iowans, and there's great history tied into the field and, of course, the story, not only with the movie, but the book, W.P. Kinsella's book, Shoeless Joe, from 1982. And, of course, it's based on, you know, a 1919 famous White Sox player named Shoeless Joe Jackson. And so there's a lot of history there. And I think as a baseball fan and someone who admires W.P. Kinsella's writing, and I think there's some wonderful symmetry there that it would be a Chicago White Sox Hall of Famer and legend like Frank to take ownership of the Field of Dreams. It just seems appropriate. So we wanted to touch on that. I think it's going to be great what Frank and his team are going to do to really expand the Field of Dreams and yet maintain the integrity of the site.
All right, Michael, people want to get a copy of the latest edition of the magazine. Where can they go? What can they do?
They can go to their local Hy-Vee or Fairway here in Des Moines at Beaverdale Books. Best bet is just to go to iowahistoryjournal.com. And if you subscribe now, we can get you started in time for the holidays. It makes a great holiday gift, and you don't have to go anywhere to do it. You can just call us or do it online.
It works. Thank you so much for sharing everything inside of the Iowa History Journal for November, December, and we look forward to the next one, sir. Thank you very much. Have a great day.